Are we live or no?
Yes, so the webinar's on and all three of you are live.
Okay.
Okay. For anybody who's out there listening, I am not able to see if I'm broadcasting. So I'm just going to hope that everybody's out there in TV land and stayed dry during our little downpour. You have tuned in for the MBU November 2022 ballot questions forum. This is being recorded and will be uploaded to our website and posted to our Facebook page after the fact. If you were trying to hear the candidates forum from last week, we had technical difficulties. I can be fairly confident that that won't happen again. So here's hoping, but I think we're all set for this event. At any rate, I wanted to welcome you all to our forum. I want to welcome anybody who is an elected official or representing an elected official for tuning in, for candidates who may be tuning in, but most importantly for you, the residents, for tuning in. Once again, we have a jam-packed ballot, 8 different questions pertaining just to Miami Beach. And if you try to make heads or tails of the county ballot questions, good luck, because I'm still trying to decipher those. But we do have some very thoughtful explanations of our positions on the questions and explanations, unbiased explanations on what the questions are actually asking, so that there won't be any confusion about what you're actually voting on. So we have sent out our explanations in our newsletter. If you don't get those, you can go to our Facebook page and see the newsletter that's posted. So that's Facebook/Miami Beach United. You can go to miamibeachunited.org and see it posted there. And you can also just email us at info@miamibeachunited.org and say, hey, I want a copy of that newsletter, and we'll be happy to send it your way. I wanted to let you know, if you don't know already, we are a 501c4 all volunteer, not-for-profit organization that was formed in 2012 to help bridge the gap between City Hall and Main Street. Our mission, our only mission, is to advocate for residents' rights, and we hope to educate residents about the slightly Byzantine process of how an idea becomes a law, and how projects wend their way through City Hall, so that you can get involved on things that affect you. You can follow along and see how we're moving through on certain issues, but you can also learn to raise issues that you care about that may not be a citywide issue, but matters to you. That's our goal. We do our forums and our newsletters. They are completely free and available to the public just for the asking, and that's how it will always be. We support the work that we do through memberships, and you can get yours for $25, which will take you through the end of 2023. Memberships is sort of like contributing to your local public radio station. You can listen for free all you want and check out the website, but your contribution helps us pay for our website hosting, our Zoom subscriptions, our videographers when we have those, and those sorts of things. The only thing you can't participate in if you're not a member is our Miami Beach United member socials, which are really fun, and we try to have them at places that are not necessarily known to everybody in Miami Beach, and they are for members only. And if anybody's ever gone to have a drink in Miami Beach, you'll know that $25 is about the cost of a draft beer these days. So it's a great value, and you're doing a great service to our collective community by helping support what we do at Miami Beach United. So please consider joining. Again, you can email us or reach out to us via Facebook or through miamibeachunited.org, our website. So without any further ado, now that I've gotten the niceties out of the way, I will let you know that we have 2 moderators, or panelists actually, who are going to be discussing the various issues. And They are Saul Gross, who you may already know. He was a co-founder of Miami Beach United in 2012, former City of Miami Beach Commissioner from 2001 to 2009. He was the chairman of the Design Review Board, the Board of Governors Chamber of Commerce, and he's a Miami Beach small business owner since 1984 and is a real estate broker and developer and attorney. So he knows this stuff pretty well. He's been involved for a long time, and we're glad to have him here. We're also glad to have Ronald Starkman here as our other panelist. He is currently the Vice President of Governmental Affairs for Miami Beach United and has been a board member for 6 years. He was a director on the board of the SOFNA Association, the South of Fifth Neighborhood Association, for 9 years. He is the past president and the current secretary. So again, he knows those issues very well as well. He is currently a member of the Miami Beach Audit Committee for the city for the past 7 years, and he's the past chairman of that committee. He was also a member of the Miami Beach Miami Beach Advisory Committee for 8 years and past chairman. And the only reason he's not still there is because he is term limited to go another round. So I feel that you can be confident in the expertise of our two panelists. And without further ado, let's jump into it. The first question, ballot question number 1, is about what is going to happen to the site where the Deauville Resort has been for the since 1957. As you know, it has been fallen victim to demolition by neglect. The question is not about looking retrospectively about what has happened in the past, but it is about what could happen there in the future. It talks about density, the increase of density, what can happen there, how many rooms, what can happen on the lot size, which is quite large, and what the new developer would be required to provide. And so that is what the question is asking. Saul, can you please address that?
Okay, thank you, Tanya. I do want to take one step back and look at the whole 8 or 7 out of the 8 ballot questions. I think that you'll see pretty quickly if you look at them that 7 of them involve development requests, generally from developers, 1 from a neighborhood association, but by and large, there's been kind of a ferocious assault to try and upzone the city whenever the opportunity presents itself. And in general, Miami Beach United feels that we shouldn't be upzoning the city because it leads to more traffic, more density, and doesn't enhance the quality of life of the residents. So I think that's our overarching attitude towards these questions. And understanding that, I'm going to jump into the specifics of the Deauville first. So the Deauville is a historic property, part of the North Beach Historic District. One of the things that's very offensive about this proposal is that there was no outreach to the community, no charrettes, no public hearings, no renderings until the very last minute in front of the Land Use Committee. The attitude was really, we have a great developer, which they do. Steve Ross is a fantastic accredited developer, but not one with experience in historic preservation. And this is integral to the North Beach Historic District. I would predict today that if this referendum question passes and the Morellos who are selling this have a contract or are in negotiations to buy the Casablanca, that the North Beach Historic District may very well go the way of the winds and completely lose its identity, which would be a real shame because it's a slice of history. The buildings have their own character and are unique. And there's a reason they were declared historic. And in our opinion, MBU's opinion, they should be saved, and the historic districts should be respected. So that's number one. Number two, no charrettes, no public hearings on the design, no going to any of the land use boards before going out to the public. The process really is not a great one, and it's just not a collaborative process. The residents are used to being engaged to collaborate with, as was done on 71st Street on North Beach. And in the end, there were several projects that were approved. It was give and take on both sides. There's none of that here. There's no respect for the historic district. The public benefit, which they're alleging, is not committed to anywhere in writing. In short, MBU would like to see something happen on this site. It is derelict, but we don't think that a property owner who has intentionally let the building be neglected to the point where it has to be demolished should be rewarded with being able to sell his property for an inordinate amount of money. I'm a believer in capitalism, but not when you're a bad actor, that you shouldn't be rewarded. I think it would set a terrible precedent. And last but not least, as you can see from the photo that's on the screen, they're requesting an FAR increase from 2 to 3.5. No, sorry, from 3 to 4.5. So you're talking about a 50% increase in the density, the total number of square feet that can be built, which I think represents 450,000 square feet of additional building. That means additional load on our streets and on our amenities and on our utilities and what have you. So honestly, other than there being a great developer at the table that we would love to try and make a deal with, there's not a lot that MBU finds to like, and that's why we're urging that you vote against this referendum.
Okay. Thank you. So I wanted to also just add to what Saul said, a couple of very late breaking, and breaking is the operative word here, developments, which are that there was a sewer line break just a couple of days ago that was just a few blocks away from the proposed Deauville site. It's not the only one that's happened up in North Beach. There are other sewer line breaks that have affected water quality, and to increase a development site from relatively low use to close to 1 million square feet of possible development without having a serious discussion first about the overall infrastructure throughout North Beach is, well, I would say it's irresponsible. So that is some additional information, and I think it was 69th and between Indian Creek and Collins, or 67th. I don't remember the street exactly, but it just happened a couple of days ago, and I drove by on my way to work, on my way home from work, and I saw cars up to the middle of their hubcaps in literal sewage water. And that's not anything anybody really would like to be contemplating. So,
Tanya?
Yes.
Tanya, I think we should tell people that if they have questions, that they should put them in the chat, and we'll just deal with them at the end.
Thank you. I forgot that up front. Thank you very much, Ron. For everybody out there, teamwork makes the dream work. It's cliche, but it's true. So yes, feel free to pop your questions into the chat. We hope to cover most of them in our explanations as we go along, but if there are any that we have not addressed, we will capture them and address them at the end of the presentation of all 8 items. Okay, so that was question number 1. That's one of the meatier ones. They're all important, but this was a little bit more complicated to explain. So again, if you want everything in writing to review when you have a chance, you can visit us on our Facebook page or email us, or go to our website and download the newsletter or ask for it to be sent to you directly. We're happy to do that. Ballot question number 2 is about the $159 million general obligation bond, which people refer to as a GO bond or GEO bond, that would be issued for arts and cultural facilities. And this one is a little bit complicated, only because for most people in the city, these are all organizations that we know, we love, we support one way or the other. We visit with out-of-town guests, we visit with our families, or by, just when we're looking for something interesting to do. So this question and our position on it is not about the organizations themselves. I just want to make that clear, because I know there's been some discussion and some concern that MBU does not support the arts, and that's not where our position is coming from. So the question is very simply, do you support issuing another GO bond to the tune of $159 million, which would, if the city prevails, they're hoping to get it dispersed, the full monies dispersed to the organizations very quickly, and possibly even before the organizations are even ready to proceed. Do you support that, or do you not support that? And to speak about this, I'm going to turn it over to Ron.
Thank you, Tanya. As Tanya has said, some of you may be surprised that MBU is opposed to this item, since virtually all of us would agree that arts and culture is worthy of support. Our concern with this item has to do with the arbitrary way this prioritizes funding for dozens of arts and culture projects when the city has so many critical infrastructure projects that remain unfunded. In this case, unlike with the last general obligation bond, the commission rushed to get this on the November ballot by just asking arts and cultural organizations how they would spend this money if it became available. The commission then selected $159 million in projects, leaving almost no time for community input on the funding allocations. Also, unlike the previous GO bond, the city's regular process for budgeting capital projects was effectively circumvented. Under the tried and true normal capital budgeting process, the city's financial staff, working with every city department, provides the commission with a list of all critical capital projects needing funding. Then the commissioners and the city staff go through a rigorous process of prioritizing projects to determine which ones should receive funding over the next 5 years. If this process had been followed, perhaps some high priority arts and culture projects would have made the list, and others would have been considered a lower priority and not made the list. If another general obligation bond needs to be issued and taxes have to go up to pay for it, at least the normal budgeting process would have ensured that this $159 million of new borrowed funds would have been allocated where the need is greatest, not just arbitrarily spent entirely for arts and culture projects. So that's why we're a no on this one.
Okay.
Tanya, let me just add one thing.
Please.
Ron explained this pretty well. If you remember, when the last GO bond came, the mayor convened a citizen resident committee comprised of residents from South Beach, Mid Beach, North Beach, a good sampling throughout the city. And they met and vetted each of the projects and recommended some and didn't recommend others. There was no public input process in the early part. The city's been trying to make up for that fairly recently by reaching out, but unfortunately, in our opinion, it's too little too late. And so for that reason, we're recommending a no vote, although we certainly respect the arts and want to see the arts flourish. But timing wise, in the middle of a recession, when there's inflation and a lot of residents are struggling to pay their bills, to have a tax increase on their real estate tax bill at this time, we just think is not the right year to do it.
Agreed with all of that. And I would also add, in case you weren't here, if you're a new resident, you weren't here when the last GO bond was passed in 2018, it was done in what they call tranches, which is the French word for slice. But it basically means the projects were divvied up. So whatever the number was of projects that were approved, let's, for the sake of argument, let's say it was 100, they were split up into, this is the first wave of projects, this is the second wave of projects, this is the third wave of projects, which means that from a financial standpoint, you don't have to get those bonds issued all at once for everything. You do it as it goes along. And so for whatever reason, that's not how this GO bond is being proposed. And again, tough economic times for folks. And even though we all, as I think we've all now said, support the arts and definitely want to see more of them and see our existing cultural institutions continue to flourish and to make Miami Beach increasingly a destination for arts and culture, the way this is being handled by the government of Miami Beach is not one that we can support. So that's where we are in that. And I hope that helps alleviate some of the concerns that we've been hearing from folks in the community. Okay, so the next question is number 3, and Saul is going to take that one as well. This is it's a bit of a more narrowly focused question, although MBU's position expands it slightly, as Saul will explain. It's basically asking if the charter should be amended to require voter approval of the sale or lease of certain city-owned properties. And it's about a specific set of lots in Mid-Beach, but as Saul will explain, we think this has broader implications. The way the question is worded is a little bit confusing, because if you don't support the sale, you might vote no, but actually it's not about whether or not you support the sale. It's about should the charter be amended. And so our resident attorney can help you parse that language so that you feel comfortable with making your decision.
Okay, so this one is fairly simple. The city saw vacant lots surrounding 41st Street, and they decided that they wanted to solicit proposals from developers to build things on this lot to generate income to the city. The residents who live around 41st Street basically were freaked out. There's a 41st Street committee that, as far as I know, didn't have any input into the process as to what they would like to have seen if any of the lots were to be developed. Just as background, waterfront property is protected from being sold by the city. Waterfront property that's owned by the city is protected. And so is property in the city center in general, which is the convention center area and the Lincoln Road area. These lots adjacent to 41st Street are not protected. And so the point of this ballot question is to require voter approval in the event that the city wants to sell any of these vacant lots or lease them, I think, for more than 10 years. So it's a protection for residents, and MBU is happy to support bringing residents into the conversation. I'd go further and say that, you know, MBU would be in favor of expanding the idea behind this, which to bring residents into the conversation at an earlier point in the process, which is a common theme to kind of all the ballot questions that we're talking about. And that would be to apply a similar requirement for resident approval in the event the city wants to sell other properties in different locations, depending perhaps on their size, you know, other parameters to be determined. But we don't think necessarily that only these few lots around 41st Street would be affected. I mean, you can go on from there as to, you know, how what they're planning on doing would affect the businesses on 41st Street, the accessibility to those businesses. You know, just in short, no real public outreach, no renderings, no ideas bounced off the community, no charrettes. It's just not a collaborative process. And I think at some point, you know, the residents and MBU just have to say, listen, this is not the way business has been conducted in the city of Miami Beach for the last 30 years, really. I mean, maybe not 30 years, but 25 years, I think. And we're used to residents being engaged in this process of what the city plans on doing with vacant city property. So none of that's happening, not on the Deauville, not here, not on Lincoln Road. Common theme, and for those reasons, MBU in this case wants you to vote yes to support requiring voter approval before the city can do things with these lots that the residents have no input on.
And when you read the position that we wrote, one of the things we commented on when we wrote our position and sent it into City Hall is that, in fact, we would like to see this additional protection for any city-owned property citywide. So regardless of where it is, whether it's waterfront or not, whether it's in a commercial district or not, if it's city-owned, it should be put to the voters before it goes to sale or lease. That's an additional point that we have suggested. We'll see where that goes. Okay, so now we're going to throw a curveball your way. So the questions 4, 5, and 6 are actually all related. And it's very interesting to see that question 4 was put first because it talks about how funds that would be generated from sale of public land, or lease of public land rather, would be used. So it could be viewed as less confrontational, but in fact, it's really quite clearly linked to questions 5 and 6. So because of that, we are going to take things out of order and do questions 5 and 6 first, and then we'll circle back to question 4. And so Saul is going to handle 5 and 6 as a group question because they are more or less the same issue with just slightly different locations of the proposal and slightly different terms of the deal, but it's more or less the same issue. So Saul, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. So this question involves the vacant parking lots in the Lincoln Road area, one that's north of Meridian. I'm sorry, just off of Meridian, north of Lincoln Lane. It's proposed for an office building and a 70,000 feet of apartments, likely luxury apartments. One of them is on the parking lot. Oh, thank you. That's a good illustration. One is on the parking lot north of Lincoln Lane between Michigan and Lenox, which is slated for a 100-foot high office building. The height limit was increased to allow additional height for this project. And then the third lot is between Lenox, actually between Lenox, and it doesn't stretch all the way to Alton, but I think it runs to like the 1111 building. So all three of these are, again, unsolicited. The city decided that it wanted to generate revenue, I think, for the budget, and put these lots out to lease. Now, in general, I think that, we found when large developments are done, that there are costs associated with those developments, whether it's additional infrastructure, additional traffic, and things like that. So the money that the city would be collecting is not really net to the city. There are expenses that have to be incurred that would offset that money. And there's not a tremendous amount of money that's being paid on this. I think if you look at it, it's close to $4 a foot for the ground rent, which is really not a lot of money. So MBU is really not comfortable with the process. I know I sound like a broken record, but there was no public input into the process in deciding what would be the best use for these lots. The city just decided that they wanted there to be office buildings. It's a little puzzling because there are probably 5 office buildings that are under development by the private sector right now. Michael Schvo has a very beautiful project on Alton Road above Epicure, and he's got another project on Washington, just north of Lincoln Road on the east side of the street. There's a proposed project for 5th and Michigan, I think it is, Michael Schro's talking about buying and redeveloping 407 Lincoln Road. The private sector is interested in office development, and if given that they are, I'm not sure that the city should be stepping in to a role where it's essentially going to be competing with the private sector over these office buildings. And what's more, if the private sector is doing it, maybe there are other things that the city could be doing that the private sector wouldn't do that make more sense from a public benefit point of view, since there's really no public benefit in these projects other than the revenue that may be generated from them. So, that's an issue that we find troubling. Additionally, I think the city's motivation is to try and bring back Lincoln Road. Lincoln Road certainly has struggled through the pandemic, and there are a lot of empty stores. There are a number of reasons for that. One, you could certainly argue that the rents were too high at $300 a foot, and they weren't able to get any of the local businesses, for sure. It's become the equivalent of a mall with just national tenants, and it lost a lot of its appeal to the residents because it didn't have that as much of the quirky kind of feeling and individual boutique kind of spaces. Basically, people can't pay at $300 a foot. I mean, the market has corrected substantially at this point, probably closer to $125 a foot. And, the landlords, some of them don't have the room to capitulate and lower their rents because they paid so much for the properties. And, in addition, retail in general is struggling all across the country. Clothing is now bought on the internet. Clothing used to constitute a majority of businesses on Lincoln Road, but no more. So building office buildings is not going to resolve that problem. So for traffic creation reasons, lack of public input, lack of public purpose, lack of public benefit, no real consultation to bring in the community other than the immediate business community on Lincoln Road, which the city did bring in. And they were in favor of it, but no resident input. So it's kind of the same comments and the same overarching theme that was presented at the outset, that we just don't think that every problem can be solved by building your way out of it, and there should be more resident participation and input into these projects. Thank you.
Before I turn it over to Ron to talk about the financial impact that Saul alluded to in his opening comments, there is a belief among certain public officials and city managers and urban planners that when a city holds land, it's holding it in trust for the residents of the city. And it's really an insurance policy. It's a rainy day policy. And it doesn't need to be developed immediately, or just because it's vacant doesn't mean that something needs to be put on it, even if it is believed that you might be generating some income, which, as Saul discussed, is a little bit up for debate as to how much of an impact that will have. We have a lot of these little pocket pieces of land that the city in the last few years has been super quick to try to bid out and either sell or lease for $1 million here or $3 million there. And really, that is our collective insurance policy. If things take a deep dive, then that's when you could sell them. Or the other way to use some of the land, as Saul mentioned, is as we just detail in great depth in our written position, it could be an opportunity for the city to do something that is harder for the private market to do. For instance, doing apartment buildings on some of those lots instead of more office buildings. They're not oceanfront. They're pretty urban setting as opposed to something that's a little bit more residential, like for instance Mid-Beach. And if it could be a fantastic way to revitalize city center, because you've got people who might be working a few blocks away and then they'd come home and they'd walk their dog down Lincoln Road and then stop in and have a bite for dinner. And bringing people in to live in that part of the city could be a really beneficial way to use those public lots, not just leasing them out to you know, an interested party for their profits. So again, a little bit complicated because it's not just on the issue, but it's also, again, as Saul mentioned, the fact that the processes have just sort of seem to have gone awry. And, you know, in the last few years, it's development at all costs, regardless of what the reason is and what the impact will be. And Miami Beach United is not an anti-development organization. We're all firm capitalists, and we, you know, there needs to be thoughtful, well planned out development to keep any city moving in the right direction. But the operative words are thoughtful and well planned out. And, you know, what we've been seeing in the last few years has been really quite sort of reactive, opportunistic projects proposed without all of the community outreach and without a sort of 30,000-foot view of how will this affect the character of place? What does this mean to this part of the neighborhood and this part of the city of Miami Beach? And how can we maximize what we have for the greater good? Those conversations, if they have been happening, they haven't been happening with the public. So again, we are reacting to the specifics, but we are also in large part reacting to the processes and lack thereof.
Tanya,
Okay.
I just want to say one more thing. You know, the city and the mayor in particular have been promoting arts and culture as the theme for Miami Beach, and which Miami Beach United agrees with wholeheartedly. We think that's a good marketing strategy. It's just interesting that they didn't take the opportunity to try and find uses for one of the lots. I mean, why do we have to build on all three? That would further the brand of arts and culture that they're trying to foster. I mean, certainly bringing the Miami New Drama to the Colony Theater has been terrific. And it brings a lot of people to Lincoln Road who might not otherwise come there. I mean, I was there a few weeks ago. There were all these people from Doral who I've never seen. The play was about Venezuelan music, and it was fantastic. Half of it I didn't understand, but you know, I love the crowd and the energy, and you know, Lincoln Road was alive because of arts and culture.
Yeah.
Not because of office buildings that people are going to go home at you know, 5 o'clock in the afternoon and sit in traffic for an hour trying to get off the beach, because most of the people who work here don't live here.
Right. And, you know, putting affordable market apartments, I mean, affordable housing doesn't mean Section 8. And of course, people who have Section 8 needs need to live someplace too. But we're talking about a young family, a young doctor, our police officers. You know, folks can't afford to live in Miami Beach unless you're a millionaire or you've, you know, been here for a very long time. And so, you know, having people who come out to Lincoln Road after work would be terrific. But in addition to that, one of the things that we lost on Lincoln Road was when and I forget what it was called, but the big art space that had gallery space and studio space for artists, and they had shows all the time, and it was open studios so people could wander in and check out what the artists were doing. The doors were almost always open, and above there were classes and workshops, so people would, you know, bring their kids in after school or for summer camp and then utilize Lincoln Road and the parts around. And when the owner of that, the not-for-profit organization,
South Florida Arts Center.
That's it. Thank you. They moved out to, I think, to Little River or Lemon City, and now they're known as Oolite. And so they're still doing their thing. But when that went away, that was sort of the canary in the coal mine, because, you know, people would come and hang out and check things out, and, you know, it became a focal point like the Colony Theater is now. People who might not have ordinarily come to Lincoln Road. Their friend was having an exhibition, or their kid was going to an after-school program, or, you know, whatever. And that's the kind of thing we need to have back. And putting together some kind of space like that in one of the lots would have been terrific. There are a ton of emerging young artists who are looking for places to work and display their art. We have two new, tiny, but new and fabulous, innovative emerging artist galleries up in North Beach, which, you know, everyone who doesn't know better thinks that that's a dead space, but it's fantastic. I mean, there are so many people who want this kind of stuff and opportunities to make it happen. And, you know, this was another, we think, another missed opportunity. Okay, go for it, Ron. Take us
Okay.
through number 4.
Thank you. So in reading ballot question number 4, you may have been impressed with the reference to 355 million in guaranteed lease payments. But the ballot language neglects to say that these payments are to be received over 99 years. So that would average 3.5 million per year for 3 acres of property adjacent to Lincoln Road. Second, the ballot language states that the proceeds are to be used, quote, solely for resiliency and sustainability infrastructure purposes, workforce housing, and public safety and crime prevention. This use of proceeds promise is also misleading, and I'm going to have to get a little technical in my explanation of why this is misleading. The city sets the target for how much to spend on resiliency, workforce housing, public safety, and all the items in the budget during the regular annual budget process, and then determines how much should come from property taxes, bonds, and or other revenue sources. For the most part, money often can easily be moved around in the budget. And there's nothing that prevents the city from using the funding from these long-term leases to offset what would otherwise have been funded from the usual sources, and then using the freed up funds for any other projects the city chooses to spend your money on. For example, if they decide to spend 130 million for police and allocate 3 million from the leases because it fits that public safety and crime prevention definition, they would only need to take then 127 million from property taxes and resort taxes instead of having to fund the entire 130 million from property taxes and resort taxes. So in this case, by using 3 million from the leases, it means that they have 3 million more in property and resort taxes, which could be used for something else, like raising salaries. In other words, this allocation of funding, as defined in this ballot question, from the leases to resiliency, workforce housing, and public safety, does not guarantee that the total actual spending will be increased for these worthwhile initiatives above what they would have been funded with without this so-called dedication of funds. Using my example, they can still spend just 130 million on police and use this extra money that's left in the tax pot somewhere else. So you may well ask, why is this on the ballot? I suspect, and Tanya alluded to this, this is just my opinion, that the people who want to see the Lincoln Road leases approved assume that voters will draw the conclusion that they should approve the leases since it will mean more money gets spent for workforce housing, resiliency, and public safety. Since the average voter doesn't realize how easily money can be moved around in the budget. So that's why we are a no on this as well.
Yeah, I will just say, I sit on the planning board and we were talking, I think it might have been at the last planning board meeting about an affordable housing fund and how that worked. And if I didn't misunderstand, I believe that what I was told was that it can be earmarked for a particular item, in this case, affordable housing, but there's no guarantee that that's how it actually gets used. And it seems like, I mean, the word shall as a legal term is binding in some ways, but the way that this question is written, it's unclear how binding it is and how those monies would get allocated, as Ron said. So I think this is, you know, a little bit of a, you know, look over here, not over there kind of a question, which is unfortunate.
Well, it worked when the Convention Center Hotel was approved. If you remember, there was a very, very similar allocation of monies from the rent to be collected from the hotel. And people liked it and they overwhelmingly supported it. And I think that the commissioners thought it worked with the Convention Center Hotel. Maybe it'll work here also to induce people to support something they may not otherwise be inclined to support. But they should be supporting it on its merits. And, you know, frankly, as part of the budget process, that's when the city allocates the funding for various needs that the city has. They shouldn't be preordaining what money is going to be used for. It's just bad budgeting practice.
Right. Again, all of our positions are laid out in quite a lot of detail that you can read and keep handy. Also, part of the newsletter has what we call the TLDR, too long didn't read, crib sheet of recommended positions. So if you don't want to have to read through everything, it gives you a little snapshot that you can take with you and proceed accordingly. The other thing is just a reminder for folks out there that if you do have questions, feel free to put them into the chat if we're not addressing them, and we will definitely cover them at the end. Okay, so the next question is question number 7. And this is concerning a density increase, a FAR incentive to convert existing hotels into residential use in a particular district. And as you may or may not know, we have a pretty significant issue with short-term rentals, and we have been hamstrung by the Tallahassee takeover from governing our city the way we would like to. We are precluded from putting a good number of laws onto our own books to deal with the city circumstances that we want to address. So we collectively, residents and commissioners and staff are trying to come up with ideas and sort of ways to limit, stop increasing, at least, if not limiting, but to try to, with the tools we have available to us, find ways to limit short-term rentals. This question goes to that issue a little bit. It is basically asking voters to approve a FAR increase to incentivize the transition of a hotel property into a residential property. And for once, and I'd like to give credit where credit is due, the city is doing the process the way they're supposed to. There was outreach and the neighborhoods weighed in, and it's a charter amendment that requires residents to approve changes in FAR. So, you know, that's great that the process is being followed. We just wish that were the case consistently. To take you through this one, before I turn it over, the one thing I will say is that, well, that's not true. I've said lots of things, but the one additional thing I will say about this is that there are folks who have pushed back on the MBU position here because they find it to be disingenuous that we support this increase in density and FAR when we do not support the Deauville increase in density and FAR. And what the difference is the way it was done, the scope of the impact, and the enormous difference in scale of what is being proposed. I mean, if you remember the pictures you saw earlier, where you see what is currently permitted versus what they are going for in North Beach, this project is much smaller in scale. The ask is much smaller, et cetera. So for those saying that it's hypocritical, I would say that it's trying to compare apples to oranges. So, okay, Ron, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. I'm going to actually clarify something a little further that Tanya said. This is not an increase in density. And that's, you know, so what's different about this item, which is on the ballot as a FAR increase, is that it is to allow the owner of the Marriott Stanton Hotel, which currently has 226 hotel rooms, to tear down the existing building and construct a new residential building that will be actually the same size and height as the current hotel with a maximum of 93 residences. And what's happened here is that since the hotel was constructed, zoning has changed to have it be lower, allowing less FAR on new projects. But in this case, they are just asking for an FAR approval to do this, what they had originally. So this is not going to be a more intensive project. It's going to be less intensive, because instead of 226 hotel rooms with all the short-term stays and the transients, and this also happens to be a very busy corner area across from Prime 112 and the Hilton Bentley and so on. So that taking that hotel and converting it to a residential building of the same size and height is actually going to reduce density. And that's why both MBU and SOFNA are supporting this change. It's quite different from the Deauville, where they're looking to put in a larger property than was there before. So that's why MBU is a yes on this one.
And in addition, as you know from your work on SOFNA, there was a tremendous amount of outreach to the community to talk about the proposal, the details, what would work, what might not work so well. And so before it even came to the ballot, the community was behind the change. And that is, you know, the 180-degree opposite of how things have been handled on the property in North Beach.
And Lincoln Road.
And Lincoln Road, that's right. And increasingly, you know, pretty much everywhere that this sort of unfettered development for the sake of development, as opposed to fill a particular need, or, you know, to see how things would work from a 30,000-foot perspective. That's pretty much how it goes. You know, a cynical person might suggest that there is less community outreach because the community would not support it. But there are no cynical people here, so we wouldn't suggest that. Okay, the last question is going to be handled by
Ron.
Thank you. My brain is freezing up, and it is to do with the another increase in FAR as an incentive for residential and office uses on Washington Avenue between 1st and 2nd Street. It seems, you know, again, we commend the city for doing the process correctly in terms of putting this to the vote of the populace, which is a charter requirement now, thanks to the vote that we prevailed on collectively as a city in August. That was a huge win. So now this has to come before you again, this kind of change. But it seems like it's awfully narrow and not sort of a best practices kind of a situation. So, Ron.
Okay, so in this case, we're a no, and it's because the increase in FAR is intended to increase density and create more square footage for basically one property. This is one of these cases where it's been drafted in such a way that there's virtually, there may be some others that could be helped by this, or would be affected by this, but this is really drafted for what's known as the Yukon office building at 119 Washington. And what it would allow the owner to do is to enclose the balconies and terraces on the building to increase the square footage available for offices, thus increasing their rental income and the potential sales price for the building. So I understand that it's for sale.
And the penthouse, I think, too, right?
What's that?
And the rooftop, I think they want.
On the rooftop, right. So this is in fact, this zoning amendment would increase the FAR square footage beyond what was permitted when the building was constructed years ago, and we had more liberal zoning. So MBU believes, and the South of Fifth Neighborhood Association, that it's important to preserve current zoning because it protects the low scale nature of the interior sections of the South of Fifth neighborhood. And in this case, the property owner is actually attempting to sort of co-opt some residents by offering to make a donation to the South Point Elementary School, which in effect is buying additional zone square footage by offering to make a donation. So the ballot language is also misleading in that it purports to reduce short-term rental activity when the property requesting this zoning change is an office building. So they're agreeing to no short-term rentals is not really going to help the neighborhood. It has nothing to do with vacation rentals, which have been disruptive in the neighborhood. In any case, short-term rentals are already prohibited in this area under existing laws. So in conclusion, we really feel that this will set a dangerous precedent if we start permitting zoning for sale, since if it passes, there will likely be a flurry of new proposals from property owners to increase the size of their existing buildings on other neighborhood streets. So that's why this is a no. It increases density, increases traffic, all the reasons that we don't like additional FAR, and why it's now that voters have to, goes before voters before these things can be approved.
I just want to, Tanya, I just want to expand on one thing that you said before, which is so important. In August, Miami Beach United sponsored a ballot referendum that prevented the city from pretending to vacate streets and deeding the square footage of the street to an adjacent development. In this case, that is exactly what would have been done to give this developer what they wanted. The city would have pretended to vacate Washington Avenue. They would have given the adjacent property owner an additional 50,000, I don't know exactly how many square feet they're adding, probably more like 20,000. And the residents wouldn't have had any say on it, and it would have been an end run around what the FAR is. It would have just been effectively increasing FAR. So thanks to Miami Beach United's hard work, that is not a workaround anymore. And that's why this is on the ballot. These kind of questions did not make it to the ballot ever since the city started indulging in that game of pretending to vacate streets and other public rights of way. So we did accomplish something significant in August. Now it's on the ballot, and it gives residents a chance to say no. You know, there's no public benefit. There's no reason to do this. And the more people approve FAR increases, there'll be a blizzard of additional FAR increase requests because people see that residents will vote in favor of it. I just don't see the public benefit to increasing development rights in a project like this.
Yeah, and they have this on, you know, they have this on the same ballot just right after this Marriott Stanton, you know, where that is clearly a change from short-term rental hotel rooms to residences where short-term rental will be prohibited. You'll have to do at least 6 months. And the concern is that voters will see short-term rental, and they'll vote yes on number 8 also, when really we feel that should be a no, and so does the neighborhood.
Yeah, residence is not a permitted use in that area, in that building, is it?
Yeah, it's not a short-term rental building, it's an office building.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the zoning says, whether or not it can be, could potentially be converted to, residential building, but regardless, it's not one now. So it's,
Yeah, Ron, did SOFNA opine on this at all?
Yes, the SOFNA has sent out emails, and we had a meeting, and we've been very clear that we're no on this. And no, I don't think economically you would have to completely gut the building, and it's not. It's an interior. It doesn't have any views. This is not a property that would be attractive to convert to residential.
I will say, just because I read far too many things, there is a movement afoot in cities across the country where they are converting less desirable office buildings to attractive residential. So it is doable, but it's more complicated, and that's not what this is about.
Well, Tanya, in the real world, this office building gets the highest rents in the city of Miami Beach in any office building.
Oh,
So
well, that's definitely
they're not converting this building.
No, but hypothetically, people are saying, we have all this terrible office space that nobody wants to rent for offices. So of course we need to build more office space. So my question is, okay, if that's the case, then let's convert this to a residential apartment building.
No, this building is in high
But
demand.
that's not this situation.
We are very happy in South of Fifth with this as an office building. It's fine. It's just that we don't want to see them get additional square footage by enclosing a bunch of areas and making the building bigger.
Right. I wanted to go back to just a couple things that both of you said along the way. The charter amendment that passed in August, the we here, if you receive our newsletters, you've seen the cheesy but true statement, there's no MBU without you. And that is actually exactly right, because the we here is Miami Beach United, who's had been advocating for this for years, and sort of went head to head with the former city attorney trying to change his view of the reading of the law. And when that didn't happen, even though prior city attorneys, not our current one, the person he replaced, and prior to that city attorney, other city attorneys had supported the MBU view that it was not okay. So anyhow, when that was not going anywhere, we said, okay, we need to do a charter amendment, and we worked for several years to get the support on the commission, and to get the votes on the commission, and to make sure the language was really well intended. And so this time around, Kristen Rosen-Gonzalez took it on her shoulders to bring it to commission, and she got the votes for it. And so it appeared on the ballot, where you all, again, the U and MBU, voted for it and supported it. And it is one of the biggest deals that we could hope for, and that is.
And also Commissioner Minor and Commissioner Fernandez voted in favor of it, and Mark Samuel, in one of the very last meetings that he ever attended before his untimely passing,
right.
Also supported it. So it was the first time that we had 4 votes, because elections have consequences, and there's an election coming up, and residents should make themselves aware of what the candidate's position is on these kind of development issues. But
Yep.
you'll find there's a pretty stark difference among them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I'm sorry, I didn't call out the other commissioners. I said that Commissioner Rosen-Gonzalez had gotten the votes on the commission. I should have called out the other commissioners who stepped up to the plate on this. But we try to advocate on issues that have citywide impact. And we sometimes get questions like, why are you opining on something that is an office building south of Fifth? That has nothing to do with citywide issues. But what happens is that these become the tip of the spear, and it's a slippery slope, because once you say yes to one project, then the next person comes along and says, well, you allowed it over here. Why can't you do it over there? And so that's why we sometimes take on what seem like very narrow neighborhood issues, because by extension, if they succeed or they don't succeed, depending on what the issue is, it then becomes precedent setting for other things around the city. And going back to what Saul said about the current owners of the Deauville trying to buy the Casablanca, if this vote goes through and passes, then it's quite likely that they will repeat their history, which they've repeated for years, not just with the Deauville, but with many other properties, of finding a way to get what they want from where they're doing business. And so again, it's a bigger issue than just the particular project, because it will have implications for this entire historic hotel district that was just designated by the city, about 12 years ago or so, if I remember correctly, but fairly recently.
We have a question for Ron.
Yep, there's a question about number 7, and I'll let Ron get into the specifics, but just as an overall, the city is precluded from doing things by law by Tallahassee, but residents in a building, the board of a building is permitted, or the owners who are making, building the development are able to proffer terms and conditions by which their building or their development will abide. And that is not, so far, has not been touched by Tallahassee.
But you should read the question so people know what you're answering.
Oh, sorry, I thought Ron was going to do that. The question is
So
having.
Let Ron do it. 'Cause
I'll answer it, but I don't have the chat open. Could you read it to me?
Yeah, I'll read it. So the question is pertaining to number 7, and more broadly, to issues along this line citywide. Does having residential units encourage more short-term Airbnb type businesses? And
yeah, in this case, the condo docs and the developer documented, the developer has already agreed, because we can't force them to do this, so they have voluntarily agreed, and they have put in writing that there will be a minimum of 6 months rental for these if somebody wants to rent one of these units. So it's long-term rental, and by the way, they're going to be very expensive. It's not like a $200 a month hotel room. They can do a maximum of 39 residents. Right now, they're targeting to do just a little over 40. So they're going to be large units, 4,000 square feet, and right on the water. So and they'll have to be minimum 6-month rentals. So it's just a huge reduction in the volume of people, transients, and that'll be that property will bring in.
thank you. And by the way, condos can do this wherever they are in the city. They can make up their own laws on how they wish to govern their building, and residents, owners, renters in the building have to abide by them or face the consequences. And you talk to folks who live in condo buildings where you're supposed to rent for no less than 3 months or 6 months, and they get busted for running an illegal Airbnb short-term rental situation, and it becomes pretty unpleasant for everybody involved. So
Yeah, but Tanya, one thing, I mean, that's not a covenant running with the land. The members
right.
of the association can change their condo
That's
docs
right.
by
Right.
voting themselves. So it's not like it's the ultimate protection.
Yeah.
no,
This
it's
is a little different. In this case, I think the technicality is that in order to get the FAR, additional FAR incentive, they are agreeing to be a 6-month or less, 6-month minimum rental property. So it doesn't just depend on the docs. It's the legal basis under which they're getting.
So there will be a covenant for taking the extra FAR.
Yes.
and
That's enforceable by the city attorney or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
again, sitting on the planning board, this is something that has come up where when people come before us with projects, we will ask if they don't already proffer it, if we're concerned about this, is this something you would consider doing at, sort of in perpetuity? And sometimes they say, yes, that's fine. And sometimes they say no, but it is increasingly something that we collectively as a city are looking to do, because if a condo board votes on something, that is not in perpetuity. If the developer is granted the right to develop a project, it gets written into the terms of the deal, and that is, it runs with the project. So, okay, so does anybody else have any more questions? I know we've been yapping on a long time here, and these are not the simplest ballot questions that we've had ever in the city. So going once, going twice. If you do think of questions later at any point, reach out to us on Facebook or through our email, which is info@miamibeachunited.org, or on our Facebook page, and somebody will get back to you for sure. And again, don't forget about the little crib sheet that we have that you can refer to if that's helpful. And we urge you to think about, if you haven't already signed up for newsletters, to at least do that. We never, ever share anybody's email address, so your email address is safe with us. And if you really love what we do and think it's valuable and want to help support us to continue doing it, think about becoming a member for $25, which again will carry your membership through December of 2023. And if you go to, let's say, 3 social events, that's $45 for one drink at time, an event. So it's a bargain at twice the price.
Because you don't get charged for the drink.
That right, because your membership, thank you, your membership includes the price of a drink and snacks for those events. And again, those are members only socials, and are really a fun way to meet people from around the city who share common interests and who you might not ordinarily cross paths with. So we encourage you to check us out. We would love to have you. So I want to thank Ron and Saul for sharing their expertise, and to Rhea, who's the brains behind the operation. She's operating all the levers and buttons and switches to make everything work. So thank you. And for all of you for coming in and getting informed, and hopefully spreading the word. And with that, I bid you all a good evening.